I never thought my best friend would get jealous over me dating other guys. Not once, but looking back, every clue was right in front of me. The way he'd go quiet, the way he always found a reason to be standing near me, the way his whole face changed the second some guy started flirting with me. I missed all of it. My name's Jordan, and this started about a year ago when my roommate Mason and I moved into a two-bedroom place across town. We weren't close before that, just college acquaintances. I needed somewhere to live after my lease fell through, and a mutual friend mentioned Mason was looking to split rent. We met for coffee, decided we wouldn't murder each other, and signed the lease 2 weeks later. It was supposed to be simple. Instead, we became inseparable. Within months, we had routines, Taco Tuesdays, Sunday runs, a running joke about whoever left dishes in the sink owing the other $5. Mason was loud, easy, the kind of guy who made friends in elevators and somehow remembered their names a week later. I was quieter, more selective, the type to enjoy a party for exactly 90 minutes before wanting to go home. We shouldn't have worked as roommates, let alone friends. Somehow we did. People who met us together started assuming we'd grown up next door to each other, which always made us laugh because we'd technically met twice in college and forgotten both times. He was straight as far as I knew, dated women constantly, had strong and loudly defended opinions about which actress was the most attractive person alive, the kind of debates that could derail an entire car ride. I'm gay, and he'd known since the week we met. It never seemed to faze him. If anything, he was more comfortable around me than most straight guys I'd lived with before, never flinching at the small things, never making me feel like a topic instead of a person. At least that's what I believed at the time. Everything felt normal until one Thursday night. My coworker Priya was throwing drinks at a wine bar downtown. Mason was supposed to come, but his shift got extended last minute. "Of course this happens tonight," he said. "I was looking forward to laughing at your karaoke. You'll live." Debatable. I grabbed my jacket. "Don't cry too hard. No promises," he called after me. The bar was warm and loud, and exactly what I needed. Somewhere around my second drink, I met a guy named Desmond, graphic designer. Easy laugh, made fun of my karaoke choice in a way that made me want to sing worse just to hear him laugh again. We talked most of the night. Before I left, he asked for my number. I gave it without thinking twice. By the time I got home, Mason was on a bar stool eating cold leftover stir-fry from the container. "You're back early. It's almost midnight. Time's a construct." I tossed my keys on the counter. "How was the party?" "Good, yeah, why?" He set his fork down. "You've got a face." "I have a face? You know what I mean." I opened the fridge. "I met someone, his name's Desmond." Something flickered across his expression, small enough I almost missed it. "Oh, cool." A pause. "Is he like your type?" "What kind of question is that?" "A normal one." "It's really not." He shrugged and grabbed his fork, but the exchange felt off, like I'd walked into a conversation he'd been having with himself. I let it go and forgot about it by morning, except my phone buzzed over coffee the next day, a text from Desmond asking to grab food that week. I was smiling at it when a voice behind me made me jump. "Who's that?" "Jesus, Mason, you scare easy." I locked my screen. "Nobody important." "Was it the design guy?" "Why do you even remember his job?" "I remember things." "Sure you do." The rest of the morning felt strangely tense, like there was a conversation underneath the conversation neither of us was having. 3 days later, Desmond and I went out for ramen. Easy, good 2 hours that didn't drag. I walked in afterward still smiling, which was apparently a mistake because Mason frowned the second he saw me. "Why do you look like that?" "Like what?" "Like you won something." "Maybe I had a nice night." "Must have been really nice." The edge in his voice caught me off guard. "You okay?" "I'm fine." He stared at the TV instead of me. At the time I figured it was work stress, nothing to do with Desmond. But over the next few weeks I noticed a pattern, and it really hit me 3 weeks later at a bar. We were out for a friend's birthday when a guy I didn't know walked over, looked right at me, and smiled. "Hey, I'm Caleb." "Jordan." We talked easily for 10 minutes, and right when he asked if I wanted another drink, Mason appeared at my elbow like he'd teleported. "Jordan, you said you'd help me find my jacket." "I did not say that." His eyes widened like he just heard himself. "Right, I thought you did." Caleb looked between us, confused. Mason laughed too loud and just stood there, not leaving, not explaining. The conversation died within minutes and Caleb wandered off. The second he was gone, I turned to Mason. "What was that?" "I don't know what you're talking about. You interrupted us for no reason." "There was a reason." "What reason?" He took a long drink instead of answering. "Forget it." I let it go again, mostly because I had no framework yet for what was happening. Then it happened again and again. The strangest part was that Mason never seemed to notice he was doing it. Every time a guy showed interest, Mason found a way to insert himself. Sometimes subtle, suddenly needing help carrying something from the car, or remembering an urgent question that absolutely could not wait until tomorrow. Sometimes not, challenging a guy to pull out of nowhere after he bought me a drink, announcing we had somewhere to be when we very much did not. At first I told myself it was coincidence, the kind of thing roommates do without thinking twice. Then our friends started noticing too, which made it a lot harder to explain away. It really clicked during a game night at our place, cards on the table, too much pizza, the usual crowd. Our friend Theo brought his cousin Adrian, visiting from out of town, quiet, funny once he warmed up, exactly my type in a way that felt almost unfair. We talked most of the night, trading stories about awful college roommates, and when he finally sat next to me on the couch, I watched Mason's whole mood shift in real time. Smaller smile. Shorter answers to people who weren't even talking to him. eyes drifting toward us no matter what hand of cards he was supposedly studying. Later, while everyone was buried in cards, my friend Reese leaned in. Oh my god. What? She nodded toward Mason. He's jealous. I almost laughed. He's straight, Reese. Sure he is. Look at his face. I looked. Mason was technically watching the card game, but his eyes kept flicking toward me and Adrian every few seconds. That doesn't mean anything. It means everything. By the end of the night, even Adrian seemed confused by the vibe in the room. After everyone left, I was rinsing dishes and Mason was wiping counters. So, what's the deal with Theo's cousin? There it was. Why do you ask? He seemed into you. Maybe, his jaw tight. Do you like him? The question landed too direct, too personal. Why does it matter to you? He froze for 1 second. It doesn't. You're acting like it does. I'm acting normal. You've been weird for weeks, Mason. Every time a guy talks to me, you suddenly need to be involved. His face went red. That's ridiculous. Then explain tonight. Nothing happened. You stood guard the whole time Adrian was here. I did not. You absolutely did. He looked frustrated in a way that seemed bigger than the argument itself, like he was trying to explain something he didn't have words for. Finally, he just shook his head and walked off, leaving me standing there with wet hands and zero answers. For almost a week, things were quietly strange. Mason acted suspiciously normal, no weird interruptions, nothing. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. Then Friday happened. I was getting ready for a date with a guy named Theo. Different Theo. Life is confusing. When Mason did a slow double take in the hallway. Where you headed? Date. Something shifted in his face. With who? Mason, you sound like a jealous boyfriend. I am not. You kind of are. What's his name? Theo. He nodded twice. How long have you known him? Are you interviewing him? Just curious. Neither of us bought that. The date went well, easy conversation, 3 hours that disappeared. I came home in a good mood and Mason muted the TV the second I walked in like he'd been waiting for the sound of the door. How'd it go? Good, good like good. Why do you care this much? I don't. You very much do. His face went red again, which should have been all the proof I needed. I told him about the date anyway. As I talked, he got quieter and quieter until I stopped. Now you're annoyed. I'm not. You're pouting. I am not pouting. I can see your face. That got a brief laugh, then it faded, and underneath it he just looked tired. You good? He stared at the muted TV. Yeah. I knew it wasn't true, but he stood up and went to bed before I could push, leaving me confused all over again. Theo started coming by regularly after that, and every time he did, Mason got impossible. Cleaned the kitchen twice in one evening, inserted himself into every conversation, stayed up till 2 a.m. despite an early shift, just orbiting us. Theo finally asked, does your roommate always do this? Do what? Hover. That was exactly the word. A few days later, Reese cornered me over coffee. You still haven't figured it out. Mason likes you. He's straight. Then why does he act like someone's stealing his husband every time you go on a date? I had nothing to say to that, which scared me a little because Theo had just asked if I wanted to be exclusive and I hadn't answered yet. Not because I didn't like him. Because every time I thought about saying yes, my mind drifted somewhere else entirely. I should have just said yes to Theo. Instead, I asked for time, and I already knew exactly why. A few nights later, he came over again, and when Mason got home from a late shift, I watched his eyes move from Theo to me and back, his smile flickering before he caught himself. He disappeared into the kitchen, where cabinets opened and closed for no reason. Theo glanced that way. He hates me. He doesn't. He really does. If Mason hated you, he's not subtle about dislike. That part was true. Whatever he felt toward Theo wasn't hatred. An hour later, Theo left, and for once Mason didn't retreat to his room. He sat scrolling his phone without really looking at it. Do you dislike Theo? What? No. Then why do you act weird when he's here? I'm not. You reorganized the spice rack during a movie. I was cleaning. You hate cleaning. He glared at me and I couldn't help smiling, which made him more annoyed. You're impossible. You're jealous. The word slipped out before I could stop it. The room went silent. He laughed hollow. Jealous of Theo? Maybe. The forced smile dropped, and for the first time he didn't deny it. He just stood up and walked off without a word, no argument, no joke. Somehow that silence was worse than any fight. The next few days he was distant, not cold, just quieter, gone more often, skipping our usual Sunday run. Reese pulled me aside at a group dinner. What happened? I told her about the jealousy comment. Jordan, he's in love with you. That's insane, is it? I had no comeback because part of me had already started wondering the same thing, and the idea didn't bother me the way it should have. That was the actual problem. The breaking point came that weekend at a friend's apartment. Drinks, music, too many people crammed into a living room not built for that many bodies. Mason disappeared at some point without saying where, and Reese found me by the snack table. Your boyfriend's outside. Not helping. Go look. I stepped onto the balcony and found him leaning on the railing, looking out over the street below like it had answers. You good? Yeah, you. Neither of us said anything for a while, the party noise muffled behind the glass door. Then he sighed. Jordan, I need to tell you something. Every alarm in my head went off at once, the way he wouldn't look at me, the way his hands kept moving like they needed somewhere to go. I already knew not the exact words, but enough to feel my pulse pick up. Been trying not to say anything. About what? He laughed at himself. I had a whole speech ready. Despite everything, I smiled. You wrote a speech. Shut up. That got a real laugh before the tension came back heavier. Every time you start seeing someone, I tell myself it doesn't matter, that you're my best friend and I should be happy for you. Neither of us moved. But then I see you with someone and I can't stand it. Mason, I know how ridiculous this sounds. It doesn't. His eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw hope underneath the fear. I've never felt like this before. I don't know if I'm gay or bi or what, and honestly I don't care anymore. I just know that every time some guy gets close to you I hate it. Silence, the longest silence of my life. Oh, Mason laughed. That's somehow worse than getting rejected. You just rewired my entire brain, give me a second. A reluctant smile crossed his face before reality caught up with him. I don't expect anything from you, I just couldn't keep pretending I was fine. Something about that hurt because I suddenly understood how long he'd been carrying this alone, hiding it behind pool games and bad excuses. And underneath it, my own feelings had quietly rearranged themselves. I wasn't upset that Mason liked me. If anything, it made me dangerously happy, which explained exactly why I hadn't been able to commit to Theo. The balcony door slid open. Jordan, Reese froze, eyes darting between us. Oh my god, you told him. Mason looked horrified, I looked horrified, Reese looked thrilled. How long were you listening? Long enough, I've waited 4 months for this. Mason buried his face in his hands. This is a nightmare. This is my Super Bowl. We all started laughing and the tension cracked open enough to breathe again. There was still one massive problem though. Liking each other was one thing. Figuring out what came next was something else entirely. The next few days were oddly normal, which somehow made everything stranger since now we both knew and neither of us was brave enough to bring it up. Mason had basically handed me his heart on that balcony, and I still hadn't given him an answer, partly because of Theo. He deserved better than silence, so I called him. The second I sat down for coffee, he already knew. You met someone. It's your roommate, isn't it? I'm not blind, Jordan. Was it that obvious? To everyone except you. We hugged it out, no drama, and I drove home relieved and completely terrified because now there were no excuses left. Mason was on the couch when I got home, visibly nervous. How was your day? I met up with Theo. He went still. Oh. Just one word, but I could hear the bracing underneath it. I ended it. His eyes went wide. I ended it, Mason. I liked him, he was great, but every time I was with him I kept thinking about someone else. The silence felt enormous. You mean, yeah, the next thing I knew we were both laughing just because months of tension had finally snapped loose. This is so weird. Thank God, I thought I was losing my mind. You kind of were. We sat there grinning like idiots until it softened into something quieter. Jordan, can I do something? Every nerve in my body lit up. I nodded and he leaned in slowly, giving me every chance to pull back. I didn't. The kiss was nervous and a little clumsy, two people figuring it out in real time, and somehow that made it better. I can't believe that's what this whole thing was about. The jealousy, I was so bad at hiding it. You really were. Watching him be embarrassed about it was almost as good as watching him be jealous in the first place. Almost. There were definitely some clumsy growing pains after that, neither of us knowing where to sit on the couch anymore, whether we were allowed to hold hands during a movie like it was no big deal. A few days later Reese came by, saw us sitting just slightly too close, and immediately started celebrating. I knew it, you two owe me money. She wasn't wrong, and apparently every friend we had figured it out long before we did. The jealousy disappeared almost overnight, which was one of the clearest signs Mason had settled into something real. At a friend's get-together, a guy started flirting with me, and old Mason would have invented an emergency on the spot. New Mason just walked over, slid an arm around my shoulders, and said, "Sorry taken," before kissing my cheek. The guy nodded and wandered off. Boyfriend. His ears went red. I might have skipped a step. You think, you know what I meant. I did, and that small moment stuck with me. He seemed lighter now, like he'd finally stopped fighting himself. Honestly, so had I. A month later we borrowed a friend's lake cabin for the weekend, no city noise, no work emails, just the two of us and a cooler full of cheap beer. The first night we sat on the dock watching the sunset turn the water orange and gold, shoulders touching, the kind of quiet that only happens when you've stopped performing for each other. I almost moved out, you know, a few months ago before any of this. I figured it'd be easier if I wasn't around you all the time, so I started looking at listings on my lunch breaks. For a few seconds I couldn't say anything at all because the idea of him actually leaving, of us never figuring any of this out, hurt more than it had any right to, and that told me everything I needed to know. I grabbed his hand and his fingers laced through mine immediately like they'd been waiting for permission. I would have hated that. Yeah, I mean it. His usual teasing dropped away into something quieter, like he actually needed to hear it out loud. So I said it again, and this time his smile reached his eyes. He leaned his forehead against mine. I'm really glad I stayed. Me too. The funny thing about finally getting what you want is that it takes a while to feel real. A few weeks after the cabin trip, our friends threw a game night and they were relentless about it the second we walked in together. There they are, Reese announced. The slowest love story in human history, Mason muttered, and somebody actually started clapping. Later, alone in the kitchen, he said, I still can't believe you didn't notice I was jealous. You challenged a guy to pool because he bought me a drink. Okay, that one's fair. You interrupted every conversation I had for 3 months straight. That one's also fair. I couldn't stop smiling and neither could he, and that was the part I loved most, not the confession, not the first kiss, but this. The easy, ordinary part where being together just felt natural. A few days later his parents visited and his mother figured the whole thing out in about 30 seconds flat. Mid-conversation she just smiled at Mason, then me, then him again, and said, "Oh, that was it." Later he looked at me. "She knows. That's terrifying. Welcome to my childhood." As the months passed, Life settled into something steady, movie nights becoming actual date nights, grocery runs becoming something we did together instead of alone, small routines forming without either of us deciding on them out loud. Almost a year after that first jealous outburst at the bar, we sat on our same balcony, the city glowing below us, my head on his shoulder, his feet up on the railing. Remember Caleb? Why would you remember his name? I hated him. You met him for 90 seconds, Mason. Didn't matter. A few quiet seconds passed before he got more thoughtful than usual. The worst part is I didn't even realize I was jealous, not for weeks. I genuinely thought I was just being a good roommate. You were terrible at hiding it. I know that now. He reached over and laced his fingers through mine, the same small gesture that still somehow made my chest feel warm every single time, even after all this. I got lucky with you. No, I said, you got jealous. He laughed, the kind that comes from somewhere real. Never letting that go, huh? Absolutely not. And sitting there beside him, looking out over the city we'd somehow built an entire life in without either of us planning it, I realized the story had never really been about jealousy at all. It was about two people terrified of losing something they hadn't even let themselves want yet. Two idiots who almost talked themselves out of something good because they were too scared to say it out loud first. Thankfully, we figured it out in time, and I wouldn't trade a single confusing, ridiculous month of it.